Now joined by my friend, Curt Mills, who's the executive director at the American Conservative. Curt also was kind enough last year to write the foreword for my recent book, A Disaster of Our Own Making, How the West Lost Ukraine. And so thank you, my friend, for coming on. We're going to get right into it. So what's going on, Curt? Is this World War III, or is this just Trumpian dynamics at play here, and we just got to live through this sort of period of instability?
I think we don't know enough about the apparent attack, and so I think it's prudent to withhold judgment for now. I think the reality is a couple of things are going on. Number one, the harsh truth that the Israeli government, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, just doesn't have that much incentive for an enduring peace. It's perhaps a little bit like Russia-Ukraine, where one party is just not terribly interested. Secondarily, the sort of mixed messaging that came out of Washington last month, was on the one hand a bone to the restraint and realism camp. On the other hand, it was a handout to people who could think that they could convince Trump into more of a regime change posture. And then finally, there is this matter of pride and kabuki about the Iranian nuclear program, or what remains of it. The Supreme Leader himself said in Persian for a domestic audience that they really hadn't destroyed it. The Foreign Minister Arachi indicated in English for an international audience that it was severely damaged. The DIA report, the Defense Intelligence Arm preliminary report, said that it really hadn't done that much, which of course attracted the extreme vitriol and anger of both Trump, but also most notably, or perhaps most pronouncedly, the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who kind of threw a theatric fit about this. So all of those dynamics give it a very either a phony war or an uneasy peace feeling. But still, it's not nearly as hot as it was in the teens of last month. And as I've been telling folks, Armageddon averted for now.
Yeah, so that does seem to be quite a caveat there, because obviously we're still giving aid to the Israelis, which makes sense. I mean, that's what we do, and certainly the Israeli calculus between Netanyahu's government being under siege at home, as well as the fact that their calculus toward Iran is fundamentally different, I think, from ours. We're sort of in this thing together now, and the question is, though, can Trump keep the two fighting sides apart from each other long enough to get some kind of a deal? And what does a deal look like, by the way? Because you have these two warring parties so far apart, existentially, dislike each other. What do you think would be an amenable deal that would possibly resolve the impasse here for the long term?
I mean, it's tough. I mean, as you allude to, we either hang together or assuredly we'll all hang separately, or at least that's the line Jerusalem is trying to hawk here in Washington. I think as to a sustainable deal, I'm not really sure one exists in any kind of durable fashion as long as the Netanyahu government holds in Israel. This is a government led by Netanyahu that wants to drive to war and wants to use his leverage in American politics to see that through fruition. If he was replaced tomorrow, he would likely be replaced with Naftali Bennett, his immediate predecessor, who is a conservative hardliner in the Israeli fashion, but far less integrated into the American system and far more predictable. This is not somebody who breaks ceasefires because he has to testify that morning. Netanyahu is that kind of creature. But with the constraints of the Netanyahu reality, and he's apparently coming here to Washington again on July 7th. I mean, the guy visits Trump seemingly more than Melania. It's his third visit in 6 months. With that caveat, we can say that basically the core of the matter is whether or not the administration can find some sort of workaround on zero enrichment. The Iranians basically think they have a sacred right to some level of enrichment, and then they also think if they do zero enrichment, which is effectively close to the so-called Libya model, which is like the voluntary disarmament, which didn't really work out for Mr. Muammar Gaddafi, that will be the end of the regime very soon. So I think it's very tight. I think the reality is the administration needs to agree to some low level of enrichment or get the Iranians to reconsider this civil nuclear compendium idea, this corridor with Saudi and UAE.
Yeah, I think that's probably also, they might even try to loop in Russia. That's been sort of talked about. Go ahead.
No, I think Russia has been underrated. I mean, Russia could behave as a deus ex machina here. The question, though, is what are the Russians' incentive? I mean, the sort of hawk line on this is that the Russians are in an axis of autocracies with the Chinese and the Iranians. But the reality is, if the U.S. got dragged into a war with Iran, that would be the greatest thing ever for the Russians and the Chinese.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. No, I agree. My other question is, we're talking a lot about regime. Greg, can you bring up clip number 6, the Barack Ravid Axios? Yeah. So, Trump has been very clear. He doesn't mind blowing up stuff in Iran. He doesn't mind giving weapons for the Israelis to blow up things in Iran. But he's been very clear, no regime change, no U.S. boots on the ground. But our friends in Israel, at least the Netanyahu Likud party, has been very, very, very clear that they prefer regime change. Now, something that we spoke to Payman Askari yesterday about, he's an Iranian exile in Canada, was regime change has already happened in a way. Khamenei, the Ayatollah, handed full control of the regime over to the hardliners in the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, and it looks like the IRGC now has complete control. So in a way, Curt, we've already done regime change, and it's made it worse in Iran now. Are you hearing the same thing? And do you think the Israelis are going to drop this canard of we're going to overthrow the regime? Because it doesn't sound like they will.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we really know. I mean, Khamenei has basically not appeared in public just once. He's probably in a bunker. All of these guys are afraid to sleep in their own apartments and houses. That's a known. I think, what we know about modern authoritarian systems within, the 21st century, non-Western systems, so-called, et cetera, is that oftentimes the most powerful apparatus is not, this sort of liberal democracy, built in opposition. Of course, like the one that's getting, sort of foisted upon the Iranians is the Shah's son, who says a lot of things that I think maybe his father would disapprove of. He himself is an autocrat. His family's autocratic. So it's a complex thing. I think the reality is, what Netanyahu wants is not necessarily what the Israeli state wants. I think Netanyahu wants the perpetuation of the crisis. And, if he were to get this sort of halcyon regime change, I honestly think that he would turn his sights on Turkey, a NATO member, next. Or saber rattle more about Pakistan. You started to hear more about Pakistan, getting an ICBM in recent days after not hearing about the Pakistani nuclear program for seemingly decades. So I don't think it would ever stop with Netanyahu. With the Israelis, I think the hawks are in that country. Their agenda is very clear, which is to break Iran into a bunch of pieces, to just basically put it into all these different ethnic enclaves, and have a very weak Iranian state, a la Iraq. Iraq is not a great place today, although they're trying their best, but it's kind of just offline. It's not on the map, and they want the same for the Iranians.
And as speaking of the Shah, I know he's in the son, Reza Pahlavi. I know he's in D.C. I know you're in D.C. You might have a better read than some of us. What is his level of support among the Iranian people? I know it sounds great. We're just going to plug. This reminds me of the old government in a box mentality the U.S. military had for the Middle East in the 2000s. We're just going to go in and plant a government, and it's just going to spring up. And what is his level of support really? How much of this is the result of very good lobbying? And is he just another glorified Ahmed Shalabi, who was the Iraqi that convinced the Bush administration that he could easily take over, and he could not? Is this similar, or am I way off on this?
There's certainly similarities. I think it's mostly the result of basically his name brand and effective lobbying. I mean, look, there are two main exile groups: the Shah's outfit, Reza Pahlavi, and the MEK. If I had to score it based, again, just from the outside, it looks like both have sort of fervent diaspora support, but the Shah's probably less controversial because he has less communistic ties and less arguable ties to Saddam Hussein. But with that exception, I mean, I think the idea that especially because the Iranians, as far as we can tell, have sort of rallied around the flag, rallied around this regime that is middlingly popular. I think the idea of sort of foisting what I think is basically seen as an Israeli-backed royal on the country, one who doesn't have his father's experience, doesn't have his father's life experience, and also talks very differently. I mean, go back to go back to a video from the late 70s, late in the Shah's reign, of the Shah talking to Mike Wallace about Israeli influence. I mean, this stuff would basically appear in the pages of the American Conservative or Counterpunch today. This is the kind of stuff that Reza Pahlavi doesn't sound like now. He will be seen as a Western puppet in all but name, and I think that's not very durable for a sustainable government in that country, that in a place we don't understand very well, and is increasingly further away. There's just not that many lines of dialogue in this country, and it's the same thing with Saddam. We didn't know what we were doing. I think we almost know what we're doing last year.
Yeah, I think you're right. And this is what I think scares me. And I know it scares a lot of our fellow MAGA people, which is why I say the American Conservative is on the front lines of this fight. Please keep up this good fight. And thank you so much, Curt, for joining us. It was great. We hope to have you back with Emerald when she's back in the chair. Guys, give him a follow. What's your Twitter handle, Curt?
Yeah, at CURTMILS, at Curt Mills on X. And the website is theamericanconservative.com.